Welcome to Wikipedia for sleep. Tonight, let's gently explore Danash. Take a soft breath, relax your body, and slowly let your eyes close as you drift into a peaceful night. Danash. Danash, often stylized as Danash, originally Nash, was a Spanish vocal group, best known for representing Spain in the Eurovision Song Contest 2007. Members: Basti, real name Esteban Pinheiro Camacho, born 28 February 1981. Cadiz Miquel, real name Michael Hennett Sotomayor, born 20 January 1983. Puerto de la Cruz Javi, real name Francisco Javier Alvarez Colinet, born 30 April 1983. Seville Ani, real name Antonio Mardos Ortiz, born 19 February 1981. Valencia biography. In February 2006, the band released its first single, Capaz de Todo, English, Capable of Everything. The album Capaz de Todo was released a month later on March 28. In June 2006, they released a second single, Donde Estás, Where Are You?, a ballad. Their album was reissued in November with 2 extra songs, Que Sabes del Amor, What Do You Know About Love, and Más Allá de las Estrellas, Beyond the Stars, a Christmas song. The latter became a single promoting the special edition. On 24 February 2007, Nash won Mission Eurovisión 2007, a Spanish TV program searching for the next representative of Spain in the Eurovision Song Contest 2007, which was held on May 12 in Helsinki. Just before entering the competition, they announced a change of name from Nash to Danash, due to the existence of a power pop band named the Nash from Mallorca. They entered the competition with the song I Love You My Vida, literally, I love you my darling, but in this case my darling refers to the love interest, making it sweetheart, which ended the night in 20th position out of 24 competitors with a total of 43 points. In April 2007, they re-released their album with the Eurovision entry song I Love You My Vida and the other finalist songs from the preselection, Una Lágrima, Tu Vas Se Apagará, La Reina de la Noche, and Busco Una Chica. Also, a cover of Ben E. King's hit Stand By Me was included on the album and was later released as a promotional single. The album reached number 23 in Spain, selling a total of 30,000 copies. In November 2007, the band released a new single, Amanda, which preceded the new album To Do Vara Cambiar, English, Everything's Going to Change, released on 4 December 2007. This album sold 35,000 copies in Spain. On 22 July 2008, it was announced that Ani would leave the group after their summer tour ended in September to pursue a career in musical theater. Their last performance as a four-piece took place in Fuengirola, Malaga. The band's 3 remaining members continued after his departure. The band split up in 2013 due to low sales of their last album Garabatos, and Javi started a solo career. The 4 original members reunited for a one-off concert in Madrid on 21 December 2014, without ruling out other future projects for the band. In 2016, the band were guest performers at Objetivo Eurovisión, the Spanish national final for the Eurovision Song Contest 2016. When you are ready, we move on to report on the sanitary condition of the laboring population of Great Britain. Report on the sanitary condition of the laboring population of Great Britain. The report on the sanitary condition of the laboring population of Great Britain is a research report into England's working-class population conducted by English reformer Edwin Chadwick and English economist Nassau William Sr. Initially requested by the Poor Law Commission, its research began in 1839 and was published in 1842. Initial research began in 1839, focused on London, requested by the Poor Law Commission. Chadwick employed surveyor John Roe, who would investigate the districts of Holborn and Finsbury, and to research methods on which is the most effective way to transport sewerage and water. After beginning the research, Home Secretary Sir James Graham, prompted by the House of Lords, asked Chadwick in 1839 and his research team to also include information on disease among the working class throughout Britain, rather than just London. Upon completion, the report was submitted to the Parliament of England in 1842 in a parliamentary session, and published in July under his own name and at his own expense. The report was compiled into 3 volumes, 2 volumes of local reports from across the whole of Britain, which were based on questionnaires and sent out to local boards of guardians, and a 3rd volume describing Chadwick's own conclusions on his research and recommendations to Parliament. Population and Sanitation. Chadwick gathered information on the average age people would die in certain regions of London. He concluded that, alongside 3 doctors, the cost of pauperism would be higher to maintain for factory owners and the government in London than if they were to prioritize the improvements of sanitary conditions. He discovered that professionals would die at an average age of 38 to 52, tradesmen at 22 to 41, and laborers at 15 to 38. However, regions with poorer sanitation meant that rich professionals would die younger in those regions than ones with better sanitation, the same going for the other 2 classes. He then concluded for larger investment in sanitation, underground sewerage and piping. John Roe suggested that the regions of Holborn and Finsbury should implement flushing gates, something that had been invented by Roe whilst conducting research on the sewerage systems in the area. These designs were then used across London and internationally by individuals like William Lindley in Hamburg, Germany, citing Roe's invention in his report. Additionally, another unnamed individual from France implemented Roe's sewerage designs in Paris. Water supplies and filtration evidence provided by physician Dr. Dice Guthrie influenced Chadwick to recommend that every house should contain a permanent water supply, rather than obtaining water from standpipes which were often used publicly, and unknowingly to the individuals at the time, caused disease like cholera. Consequently, Chadwick strongly criticized the inadequacy of existing public water supplies, drainage, and sewerage systems in London. He also criticized private water companies for providing clean water only to the middle and upper classes of London. However, Chadwick also criticized how these companies weren't cleaning the water correctly, even for the affluent civilians of London. Therefore, he suggested less people be in charge of the private water companies and to improve their filtration. Reception. The report was treated with negative reactions from across England, but some considered it to be the beginning of a new reformist movement for England's poor and working classes. Sir James Graham was reluctant to implement the findings and recommendations in Parliament. In the end, he established the Royal Commission on the Health of Towns in 1843/44. The report, combined with Chadwick writing letters often to the government and Poor Law Commission urging for significant change, led to the eventual creation of the Public Health Act 1848, a permissive act, yet it was a step in attempting to tackle the sanitary conditions of towns and cities in England, where its main aims were to tackle drainage, sewerage, and street paving. This also led to the creation of a local board of health, catalyzed by the cholera epidemics, notably the 1826 to 1837 cholera pandemic, which attempted to implement the reforms of the Act and report's recommendations. Chadwick was appointed commissioner. Supplementary report. A supplementary report was also published in 1843, titled The Report on the Sanitary Condition of the Laboring Population of Great Britain. A supplementary report on the results of a special inquiry into the practice of interment in towns. In this report, he reviewed burial conditions, reported on the conditions of poor families, the impact of limited funds due to dead relatives, and overcrowded living spaces. He noted that families often spent too much money on funerals, regarding this as wasteful. Next, we turn softly to Rattling cisticola. Rattling cisticola. The rattling cisticola, Cisticola ciniana, is a species of bird in the family Cisticolidae which is native to Africa south of the equator and parts of East Africa. It is a common to abundant species in open savanna and scrubland habitats, whether in arid, moist, or upland regions. Especially during summer, it is highly conspicuous due to its strident and repetitive call notes from prominent perches. Taxonomy. The rattling cisticola was formally described in 1843 by the Scottish zoologist Andrew Smith, under the binomial name Drymoica ciniana, based on a male specimen collected near the town of Zeerust in the northwest province of South Africa. The specific epithet ciniana is probably from the toponym Cheniane, or Tshweniane Mountains that lie to the north of Zeerust. The rattling cisticola is now one of 53 species placed in the genus Cisticola that was introduced in 1829 by the German naturalist Johann Jakob Kopp. 17 subspecies are recognized. C. Simplex Huglin, 1869, South Sudan, Northeast DR Congo and North Uganda C. Fricki Mearns, 1913, South Ethiopia and North Kenya C. 40s lines, 1930, Gabon to central Angola, South DR Congo and Zambia C. Asli. Humiles Madaras, G. 1904, East Uganda and West Kenya C. Asli. Fishery Raihano, 1891, Central North Tanzania C. Asli. Ukamba Lines, 1930, Central Kenya and North Tanzania C. Asli. Victoria Lines, 1930, Southwest Kenya and North Tanzania C. Asli. Heterophrys Oberhalser, 1906, Coastal Kenya and Tanzania C. Asli. Keithai Parks, 1987, Central South Tanzania C. Asli. Mbeya Parks, 1987, South Tanzania C. Asli. Emendatus Vincent, 1944, Malawi, Southeast Tanzania and North Mozambique C. Asli. Prosperous Peters, W. 1868, East Zambia, South Malawi and Central Mozambique C. Asli. Frater Raihano, 1916, Central Namibia C. Asli. Bensoni Trailer, 1964, South Zambia C. Asli. Smithersea Hall, Bay P, 1956, South Angola and North Namibia to West Zimbabwe C. Asli. Chiniana Smith, A. 1843, Southeast Botswana and Zimbabwe to Central South Mozambique and Central South Africa C. Asli. Campestris Good, 1845, Southeast Mozambique and East South Africa distribution and habitat. It is found in Angola, Botswana, Burundi, Republic of the Congo, DRC, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, Somalia, South Africa, South Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Its natural habitat is arid, mesic or moist savannas and woodland, often dominated by thorn trees or thorn shrub dicrostaceae, and so on. It is, however, also commonly found in Miombo and Mopane woodland, and is one of the commonest bird species on the Mozambican coastal plain. It is also present in the eastern highlands and the East African uplands below 2,000 m. In addition, it utilizes some ectones including edges of cultivation, fringes of dense woodland and woodland, fringing the Okavango Delta. The tinkling cisticola replaces it in stunted broad-leaved woodland and dry deciduous woodland on sandy substrates, while various cisticola species replace it in marshy situations. It co-occurs with various Prinia species. Behavior. Especially in summer, much time is spent calling prominently from the top of a tree or bush. The strident call can be rendered as chi-chi-chichai-chura, but varies somewhat from individual to individual. Breeding occurs during the wet season in spring and summer. They build a ball-shaped nest of very coarse grass blades, which is lined on the inside with fine plant material. Our next topic tonight is round-topped boiler. Round-topped boiler. A round-topped boiler is a type of boiler used for some designs of steam locomotive and portable engine. It was an early form of locomotive boiler, although continuing to be used for new locomotives through to the end of steam locomotive manufacture in the 1960s. Firebox. They use the early form of firebox, where the outer wrapper of the firebox is a semicircular continuation of the cylindrical boiler barrel. They are relatively simple in shape and manufacture, but their design and service is complicated by the difference in shape between the outer and the flat-topped inner wrapper of the firebox. This requires complex staying to support it. The first boilers of this form had raised fireboxes that were considerably larger, particularly higher, than the boiler barrel. In the extreme case, this gave rise to the haycock boiler, where the firebox was raised into a vaulted dome. In most cases, though, the firebox was merely larger by the width of the internal iron framing section. Around 1850, at the instigation of Crampton, the firebox adopted the flush-topped firebox casing, where it was of the same diameter as the boiler barrel and joined to it by riveted lap strips. The early boiler fireboxes had flat parallel sides, see Figure 1. As locomotives grew in power, their boilers expanded in diameter, but the width of the firebox grate was still constrained by the need to fit between the locomotive frames, which were themselves constrained by the gauge between the wheels. This led to the development of the waisted form, see Figure 2, where a narrow firebox flared upwards and outwards to meet the boiler barrel. Staying of these firebox side walls could still use simple short rod stays, although these were progressively tilted in the middle of the firebox, so as to remain perpendicular to the sheets. Because the shape of the firebox follows the shape of the boiler barrel, they are used for saddle tank locomotives. The Hunslet Austerity, the last production steam locomotives to be constructed in the UK, used this form. A staying. The upper crown sheet of the inner firebox is, as with most locomotive boilers, approximately flat and horizontal, so as to maintain a constant depth of water over this hardest part of the firebox. This flat surface, with steam pressure on its upper side, requires stays to support it. As it is not a constant distance from the boiler barrel, unlike the firebox sides, this staying is difficult to arrange. Girder stays. Early examples soon used girder stays to support the inner firebox crown. These are iron girders spanning the length or width on the outside of the inner firebox, that is in the water space. The crown sheet is bolted to these. The force on the ends of the girder stays is supported by the ends or sides of the inner firebox. The upper part of the boiler barrel is unconnected to the firebox. This has the advantage that a large hole may be cut in the boiler directly above the firebox to mount the steam dome. Rod and sling stays. Larger boilers could not support their firebox crowns entirely on the inner firebox and required a means to support it from the boiler barrel. As this is also forced outwards by the steam pressure, the total force could be shared between many small stays. Each stay carried enough force on each end to balance itself. Avoiding the large bending forces at the ends of the girder stays' thermal expansion was a problem for these long rod stays, both in their expansion tending to elongate them and reduce their staying effect. Also, as the inner firebox expanded in length, this would bend the stays forwards. Where a long firebox was stayed, the forward rod stays were replaced with sling stays, a rod stay with a hinge at the upper end, allowing it to move forwards with the firebox. These stays were also placed in the most active part of the boiler, where corrosion was at its worst. Careful inspection and periodic replacement of them was needed to avoid the risk of a boiler explosion. The main difficulty of rod stays was that it required a large number of rod stays, each of which was placed at a different angle to its neighbor. The complexity of this rod staying was what drove Alfred Belpaire to develop his Belpaire firebox. This used a more complicated squared-off outer firebox, which was more difficult to manufacture, but could now use simple short rod stays throughout, as for the firebox sides. Examples: locomotive designs fitted with round-topped boilers. Let us drift gently now toward Gammarus desperatus. Gammarus desperatus. Gammarus desperatus, commonly known as Knowles amphipod, is a species of small amphipod crustacean in the family Gammaridae. Knowles amphipod was formerly found at 3 sites in New Mexico, but it has since been extirpated from 2 of these sites. Knowles amphipod only survives within Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge. It is listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, and as an endangered species under the United States Endangered Species Act. Description: Knowles amphipods are small aquatic invertebrates found in fresh water. Knowles amphipods are a brownish-green color, with kidney-shaped eyes and red stripes running along numerous different segments. They have 2 sets of antennae that are covered in setae, which are hair-like structures found on many invertebrates. Knowles amphipod is also known to have 5 to 7 spines located near the head. Males are somewhat bigger than females, with sizes ranging from 5 to 14, 8 millimeters. Life history: Knowles amphipods complete a full life cycle in 1 year. Due to the short lifespan of the species, individuals have a fast growth rate and reach sexual maturity usually within 2 months. The breeding times range from February to October, depending on water temperatures. When a male and female amphipod come together to mate, the male grasps the female with its gnathopods and guards her for up to 7 days to defend against potential rival males. During this period of mate guarding, the pair continue to feed and swim until the female molts. Shortly after molting, the female releases the eggs into the marsupium egg pouch, and the male then fertilizes the eggs. The female incubates the eggs in the egg pouch until the young hatch, then releases them after a few hours or days. The Knowles amphipod produces a brood of 15 to 50 young amphipods. Ecology. Diet: Knowles amphipods are omnivorous and feed on algae, underwater vegetation, and decaying matter. They often are seen feeding on biofilms that form on submerged aquatic vegetation. These biofilms consist of algae, diatoms, bacteria, and fungi. Microbial foods associated with periphyton or aquatic plants, such as algae and bacteria, are essential for juvenile amphipods. Behavior: Knowles amphipods exhibit a period of mate guarding, in which the male is territorial over the female and protects his mate from other males that compete for the ability to fertilize the female's eggs. This species is mostly nocturnal due to its sensitivity to light, and is mostly active only during the nighttime. Habitat: the amphipods require clean, shallow, cool, and permanently flowing, well-oxygenated waters of streams, ponds, ditches, sloughs, and springs. In addition to this species is very sensitive to pH changes in the water and also requires high levels of calcium for survival. These amphipods are often found underneath stones and amongst submerged aquatic vegetation. They are extremely sensitive to water contamination and do not tolerate habitat desiccation, standing water, or sedimentation. In summary, this species is very sensitive to habitat degradation. Range Knowles amphipod was formerly found at 3 sites in New Mexico, but it has since been eradicated from 2 of these sites. Knowles amphipod only survives within Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge at the Sago Spring Wetland Complex, Bitter Creek, and along the western boundary of Unit 6. Conservation. Population size. In the past, amphipod populations have been able to reach extremely high densities, occasionally exceeding 10,000 per square meter. In 1954, Knowles amphipod was described as the largest population of macroinvertebrates at Lander Springbrook, with densities ranging from 2,338 to 10,416 per square meter. In 1995 and 1996, on Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge, the Knowles amphipod population density ranged from 64 per square meter to 8,768 per square meter at Bitter Creek, and 20 per square meter to 575 per square meter at Sago Spring Wetland Complex. In 1999, the population density of the Knowles amphipod at Unit 6 on Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge was 344 per square meter. Major threats. One key threat to the Knowles amphipod is diminished water quantity in the area due to groundwater pumping and drought. Water contamination also affects these amphipods. Secondary threats to these organisms include inadequate existing regulatory mechanisms, localized range, limited mobility, fragmented habitat, and climate change. Past and current geographical distribution. Knowles amphipod was originally found in 3 springs near the Roswell Basin in New Mexico, but both populations outside of Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge vanished before 1988 due to groundwater depletion and spring channelization. A 2002 fire destroyed their population within the refuge by removing the vegetative cover that protected them from sunlight and depositing ash and debris into their freshwater habitat. It is currently assumed that they are now only found within the Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge. Date listed. The Knowles amphipod was listed on the Endangered Species Act on August 9, 2005, because of its small population that appears to only exist in the Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico. 5-year review. In 2020, a 5-year review was conducted on 4 endangered species in the Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge, including the Knowles amphipod. In 2010, the initial 5-year review of these species was completed, and critical habitat designation was finalized in June 2011. Critical habitat designation was achieved in June 2011. In the critical habitat designation, 72 acres were given to the Knowles amphipod. The final recovery plan for these 4 invertebrate species was finalized in October 2019 and makes references to the 5-year review. In this 5-year review, there are 4 goals listed. The first goal is to maintain the long-term survival of each species. The second is to protect water quantity. The third is to protect water quality. And finally, the fourth goal is to protect and restore their habitat. There was no change in biological information, threats, or listing from the previous 5-year review, since little research has been done on the actual crustacean. However, the 5-year plan emphasizes the importance of following the recovery plan that was established in 2019. Recovery plan. The recovery plan strategy involves preserving, restoring, and managing the Knowles amphipod's aquatic habitat in order to support resilient populations of these species. The recovery plan aims to maintain and protect the population size through securing good water quantity and quality, and protecting their habitat's land. This approach also includes controlling invasive species. It is important to collaborate with conservation partners to achieve the goals listed in the 5-year review, while also providing the communities with enough water themselves. This is done through community engagement and promoting the importance of Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge and its biodiversity. Recovery of this species requires that we maintain and protect Knowles amphipods and their habitats so that the species stabilizes and can then be removed from the endangered species list. This is attainable and will happen if this list of needs are met. First, secure the long-term survival of the species with the appropriate number, size, and distribution. Second, preserve water quantity and quality. Third, reduce the threats to the species and its ecosystem so Knowles amphipods can re-establish a stable population size. It would also be beneficial to conduct more research to better understand their species patterns, genetic diversity, and then be able to identify new sites for species introductions. It is critical to the conservation of this species that we develop long-term management strategies and educational programs to help protect the Knowles amphipod. By teaching the immediate surrounding community about their habitat needs and importance, we increase our capacity for protecting them. Let your mind wander now to 2nd Glamorganshire Artillery Volunteers. 2nd Glamorganshire Artillery Volunteers. The 2nd Glamorganshire Artillery Volunteers was a part-time unit of the British Army that defended the coast of South Wales from 1890 to 1942. Although it never saw action in its coastal defense role, it formed several siege batteries of heavy howitzers for service on the Western Front and Italian Front in World War I. Volunteer force. The enthusiasm for the volunteer movement following an invasion scare in 1859 saw the creation of many units composed of part-time soldiers eager to supplement the regular British Army in time of need. A number of Artillery Volunteer Corps, AVCs, were formed for coastal defense in South Wales, and by the 1880, they had been consolidated as the first Glamorganshire Artillery Volunteer Corps of 17 batteries. In 1890, the unit's headquarters, HQ, moved from Cardiff to Swansea, and the batteries grouped round Cardiff were separated to form a new second Glamorganshire AVC. After reorganization, these became 11 batteries, companies from 1891, distributed as follows: HQ and NOS 1 to 7 companies at Cardiff, No 8 company at Bridgend and Tondu, NOS 9, and 10 companies at Penarth, No 11 company at Barry Sir Edward Hill, VD, MP, who had been Lieutenant Colonel Commandant of the 1st Glamorganshire since 22 July 1864, retained the position with both units after 1 June 1890, though each had its own Lieutenant Colonel and Honorary Colonel. The new unit formed part of the Western Division of the Royal Artillery, RA. In 1899, the Artillery Volunteers became part of the Royal Garrison Artillery, RGA. And when the divisional structure was abolished, the Cardiff unit was designated the 2nd Glamorganshire RGA Volunteers on 1 January 1902. Territorial Force. When the volunteer force was subsumed into the new Territorial Force, TF, under the Haldane reforms of 1908, the 1st Glamorganshire transferred to the Royal Field Artillery, and the 2nd Glamorganshire became the Glamorgan and Pembroke RGA. The Pembroke part of the title was dropped in 1910, when a separate Pembroke RGA of 3 companies was formed. The Glamorgan RGA was designated as a defended ports unit in Western Coast Defences, which was based at Pembroke Dock, and it had the following organization: HQ at Cardiff, NOS 1 to 3 companies at Cardiff, No 4 company at Penarth, No 5 company at Barry. World War I. Mobilization. The Glamorgan RGA mobilized in August 1914 as part of No 26 Coastal Fire Command, responsible for the following guns: Cardiff, 4 x 6-inch guns Barry, 2 x 6-inch guns Swansea, 2 x 4, 7-inch QF guns. After the outbreak of war, TF units were invited to volunteer for overseas service, and on 15 August 1914, the War Office, WO, issued instructions to separate those men who had signed up for home service only and form these into reserve units. On 31 August, the formation of a reserve or second line unit was authorized for each first line unit, where 60% or more of the men had volunteered for overseas service. The titles of these second-line units would be the same as the original, but distinguished by a 2/ prefix. In this way, duplicate brigades, companies and batteries were created, mirroring those TF formations being sent overseas. By October 1914, the campaign on the Western Front was bogging down into trench warfare, and there was an urgent need for batteries of siege artillery to be sent to France. The WO decided that the TF coastal gunners were well enough trained to take over many of the duties in the coastal defenses, releasing regular RGA gunners for service in the field, and first-line RGA companies that had volunteered for overseas service had been authorized to increase their strength by 50%. Although complete defended ports units never went overseas, they did supply trained gunners to RGA units serving overseas. They also provided cotters to form new units for front-line service, and the Glamorgan RGA is known to have raised at least 5 siege batteries in this way. 96th, 121st, 172nd, 359th, and 402nd. Under Army Council Instruction 686 of April 1917, the coastal defense companies of the RGA-TF were reorganized. By this stage of the war, the Glamorgan RGA, serving in the Swansea and Severn defenses of Western Command, consisted of just 3 companies, the rest having formed batteries for overseas service. These companies were given a slightly higher establishment, 5 officers and 100 other ranks, and renumbered, abolishing the first and second line distinction. 1/2 company became no 1 company, 1/3 company became no 2 company, 2/2 company became no 3 company in April 1918. The Cardiff/Barry garrison manned guns as follows: Nell's Point, Barry Battery, 2x 6-inch Mk Roman 7 guns, Penarth Head, Cardiff Battery, 2x 6-inch Mk Roman 7 guns, the Swansea garrison manned. 96th Siege Battery, RGA. According to WO Instruction No. 181 of 16 December 1915, 96th Siege Battery was to be formed at Pembroke Dock by 3 officers and 78 other ranks, the establishment of a full company, drawn from the Glamorgan RGA. The battery actually formed on 1 January 1916, with 3 officers and 90 men from the Glamorgan RGA, and 64 recruits from the Pembroke Dock RGA establishment, under the command of Major C. H. M. Sturgis. It went out to the Western Front on 21 May 1916 and joined 19th Heavy Artillery Group in 3rd Army on 25 May, taking over 4 9-2-inch howitzers in existing emplacements near Pommier from 62nd Siege BTY. 96th Siege Battery saw its first action preparing for the attack on the Gammarus salient in the Battle of the Somme. As the final bombardment began on Z-Day, 1 July, the battery fired with such intensity that the oil in the gun's hydraulic recoil buffers boiled. However, the Gammarus attack was a disaster. Later, the battery served with 1st Army at Arras and with 5th Army in the latter stages of the Battle of Passchendaele, where the British artillery suffered badly from counter-battery fire, while their own guns sank into the mud and became difficult to aim and fire. It then served through the defensive battles of the German Spring Offensive, followed by the victorious 100 Days Offensive. 96th Siege Battery was disbanded in 1919. 121st Siege Battery, RGA. 121st Siege Battery, RGA, was raised at Pembroke Dock on 22 March 1916, under Army Council Instruction 701 of 31 March 1916, with 3 officers and 78 other ranks from the Glamorgan RGA. It went out to the Western Front in July 1916, manning 4 9-2-inch howitzers, and joined I Anzac Corps in 5th Army on 15 July in time for the Battle of Pozieres. It was later engaged at Arras and Passchendaele. 121st Siege Bty was joined by a section from 428th Siege Bty and expanded to 6.9, 2-inch howitzers by the end of 1917. The battery was caught up in the Great Retreat of March 1918, but returned during the 100 Days Campaign, including supporting the assault crossing of the St. Quentin Canal on 29 September, and participating in the crushing artillery barrages of the victorious 100 Days Offensive. 121st Siege Battery was disbanded in 1919. 172nd Siege Battery, RGA. 172nd Siege Battery, RGA, was raised at Cardiff with 3 officers and 78 other ranks from the Glamorgan RGA under Army Council Instruction 1239 of 21 June 1916. It went out to the Western Front on 12 September 1916, equipped with 4 6-inch 26 CWT howitzers. It was engaged in the preparation for the Arras offensive and at Passchendaele. 172nd Siege Bty was joined by a section from 415th Siege Bty on 26 August 1917 and brought up to a strength of 6 6-inch howitzers. In November 1917, the battery was part of the reinforcements sent to the Italian front after the disastrous Battle of Caporetto. It went into action supporting the Italian army holding the line of the River Piave, and in June 1918 supported the defenses during the Second Battle of the Piave River. The British guns participated in the final battle on the Italian front, the stunning success of the Battle of Vittorio Veneto on 23 October. By 1 November, the Austrian army had collapsed, and the pursuing British troops had left their heavy guns far in the rear. 172nd Battery was disbanded by the end of March 1919. 359th Siege Battery, RGA 359th Siege Battery, formed at Lavernock Battery near Cardiff on 21 January 1917. It trained as a BL 12-inch railway howitzer battery and went out to the Western Front on 10 June 1917, joining 19th HAG with Roman 15 Corps on the Flanders coast. 10th HAG transferred to 4th Army HQ on 1 August. The battery joined 76th HAG with 2nd Army in the Ypres salient on 21 September, while 2nd Army was fighting the last stages of the Battle of Passchendaele. On 14 November, the battery transferred to 80th HAG, but that headquarters was sent to the Italian front, so the battery came under the command of other HAGs until January 1918, when it became Army troops and was no longer attached to a HAG. Railway construction lagged during the rapid advances of the 100 Days Offensive, and the battery was left behind in the salient. It was still serving with 2nd Army when the armistice came into force in November 1918. 359th Siege Battery was disbanded in 1919. 402nd Siege Battery, RGA 402nd Siege Battery, RGA, was raised at Lavernock on 17 March 1917 from a nucleus provided by details of the Glamorganshire RGA. It went out to the Western Front on 30 July and joined First Army in August. The battery was then broken up, one section going to reinforce 17th Siege BTY, the other to 68th Siege BTY, itself formed by the Pembroke RGA. Interwar, after the TF was demobilized in 1919, the Glamorgan RGA was placed in suspended animation. It was reformed from NOS 1 to 3 companies at Cardiff in 1920, with one battery. When the TF was reconstituted as the Territorial Army TA, in 1921, the unit was designated as the Glamorgan Coast Brigade, RGA. It consisted of HQ and 181 heavy battery at the Drill Hall, Cardiff, in 53rd Welsh Divisional Area. In 1924, the RGA was subsumed into the RA. In 1926, it was decided that the coast defences of the UK would be manned by the TA alone. The unit was responsible for manning the 2 6-inch guns at Lavernock Battery near Cardiff and the 2 4, 7-inch guns at Mumbles Battery near Swansea. A 1927 report on coastal defenses by the Committee of Imperial Defense made recommendations for the defense of 15 home ports, and another 8 schemes were added in 1929, including Swansea, Barry, Cardiff, and Newport, but little was done to modernize them. On 1 November 1938, the coast brigades were redesignated as heavy regiments. Hence the unit at Cardiff became the Glamorgan Heavy Regiment, RA. World War II. Mobilization. The regiment mobilized in Western Command on the outbreak of war in September 1939, with the single 181 battery under command. Cardiff and Barry were designated Class A defended ports, with guns installed in peacetime, though the defense schemes of both were still being prepared. On 12 April 1940, plans were made for 6-inch guns to be installed at Swansea. When the Battle of France turned against the Allies in May 1940, the Admiralty made a number of 6-inch guns available to the Army for coastal defense. And when the whole of the UK was put on invasion alert after the Dunkirk evacuation, a massive program of coastal defenses was initiated. Although this mainly involved the likely invasion areas of South and Southeast England, an emergency battery of 2 BL 6-inch Mk Roman 12 naval guns was authorized on 12 June for Penarth, and 2 more of 2 BL 4-inch Mk Roman 7 naval guns. Each were authorized for Anelli and Port Talbot on 21 July and completed by 24 August. These guns were moved around as required. As of November 1940, Cardiff and Barry had 4 6-inch guns, Swansea had 2 6-inch and 2 4, 7-inch, and Anelli had 1 4-inch. Although designated a major port, Newport still had no guns. On 5 September 1940, the coastal artillery was reorganized, and the regiment became 531st Glamorgan Coast Regiment, with 181 BTY expanded to A and BB ties. In addition, 21st Coast Artillery Group, later 559th Special Coast Regiment, was formed on 18 October 1940 at Mumbles, with 401 and 402 BTIs. Joined on 22 October by BBTY from 531st Coast RGT. Britain's coastal defences reached their height in September 1941, by which time Cardiff, Swansea and Barry, all defined as major ports, each had 2 6-inch guns and Barry had 2 4.7-inch in addition. Newport still only had 2 12-pounders, as did Anelli. Port Talbot had a defense battery of 2 4-inch guns. At this stage of the war, the coast defenses in Glamorgan were as follows. 531st, Glamorgan, Coast Regiment HQ at Cardiff, a BTY, redesignated 130 BTY 1, April 1941 365 BTY at Portishead, joined 31 December 1940 366 BTY at Steep Holme South, joined 31 December 1940 192 BTY, formed 27 March 1941 145 Independent BTY, joined 1 July 1941 170 BTY, joined from Home Forces 16 July 1941 to 560th Coast RGT 10 August 1940 188 BTY, joined from Home Forces 11 August 1941 189 BTY, joined from 524th Lancashire and Cheshire Coast RGT 10 October 1941 427 BTY, twin 6-pounder QF battery formed at Lidstep Haven, Tenby, 14 August and attached to Cardiff and regimented 7 November 1941 430 BTY, twin 6-pounder QF battery formed at 73rd Coast Training RGT, Lidstep, 11 September, to Cardiff and joined 7 November 1941 559th Special Coast Regiment, redesignated from 21st CA Group, 1 June 1941, HQ at Mumbles 401 BTY, at Port Talbot 402 BTY, at Anelli 298 BTY at Mumbles Hill, redesignated from B/531 BTY, joined 22 October 1940 166 BTY at Mumbles Rock, formed 27 March 1941, to 533rd Orkney Coast RGT 3 June 1941 146 BTY, joined from 535th Orkney Coast RGT 28 May 1941 32 and 33 Coast Observer Detachments, joined by December 1941 mid-war. At the end of 1941, the defenses of the Severn Estuary were completely reorganized. Cardiff Fire Command was reorganized into 3 separate fire commands, with 531st RGT in Docks FC. 531st RGT lost 4 of its batteries to 2 new coast regiments, 570th and 571st, formed from Flat Holme and Breandown Fire Control respectively, while 192 BTY was disbanded. This gave the following organization: 531st Glamorgan Coast Regiment HQ Cardiff 130 BTY, became Independent 14 October 1942 170 Independent BTY, returned from 560th Coast RGT 14 October 1942 187 BTY, from 537th Coast RGT 10 July 1942 427 BTY, left for 514th Coast, RGT 30 June 1942, 430 BTY, 559th Coast Regiment, HQ Mumbles 146 BTY, to 570th Coast, RGT 7, December 1942, 298 BTY. Left for 562nd Coast, RGT 2, May 1942, 299 BTY. Joined from 562nd Coast, RGT 2, May 1942, 401 BTY. Left for 561st Coast, RGT 1 November 1942, 402 BTY. Left for 554th Coast, RGT 26 May 1942, 422 BTY. Joined from 561st Coast, RGT 1 November 1942, 431 BTY. Twin 6-pounder QF battery formed at 73rd Coast Training RGT, Lidstep, 11 September. To Swansea and joined 15 December 1941 32 Coast Observer Detachment. Left for 532nd, Pembroke Coast RGT by December 1942 33 Coast Observer Detachment 36, Mobile Defense Troop, RA, joined January 1942. Disbanded May 1942, 570th Coast Regiment, HQ Flat Home. Moved to Barry 7 December 1942, 145 BTY. From 531st Coast, RGT 19, December 1941, 188. 189 B-ties. From 531st Coast, RGT 19, December 1941, 571st Coast Regiment, HQ, Breendown 365. 366 B-ties. From 531st Coast, RGT 19, December 1941, 531st, 570th, and 571st Coast RGTS were under HQ 7 defenses, while 559th, further west at the Mumbles, was directly under Western Command until it joined 7 defenses in 1942. Late war by 1942, the threat from German attack had diminished, and there was demand for trained gunners for the fighting fronts. A process of reducing the manpower in the coast defenses began. 531st, Glamorgan, Coast RGT was stood down 7 December 1942, completing on 31 December. Its 3 remaining batteries assigned to 570th Coast RGT, which together with other reassignments gave 7 defenses the following organization in 1943. 559th Coast RGT 299, 422, 431, BTI's 24 Coast Observer Detachment, joined by July 1943 33 Coast Observer Detachment, 570th Coast RGT 145, 146, 170, 187, 430 BTIs 205 BTY. From 537th Coast RGT 7 December 1942 1. 2 Coast Observer Detachments, disbanded by May 1943 105 Coast Observer Detachment, joined by December 1942 106 Coast Observer Detachment, joined by December 1942, to 532nd Coast RGT by July 1943, returned by November 1943, 571st Coast RGT 184, 188, 189, 366 BTI's 78 Coast Observer Detachment, joined by November 1943 disbandment. The manpower requirements for the forthcoming Allied invasion of Normandy, Operation Overlord, led to further reductions in coast defenses in April 1944. 559th and 571st Coast RGTS were disbanded, and 570th had all their batteries assigned to it. 24 and 33 Coast Observer Detachments replacing 105 and 106, though they also left in July. By this stage of the war, many of the coast battery positions were manned by Home Guard detachments or in the hands of care and maintenance parties. The separate HQ for Severn Fixed Defenses was also disbanded, and the regiment came directly under Western Command. 570th Coast RGT itself was disbanded at Barry on 1 June 1945, shortly after VE Day, together with 170, 184, 187, 189, 205, 366, 422, 430 and 431 BTIs. The remaining TA batteries, 145, 146, and 299, went into suspended animation. Post-war, when the TA was reformed in 1947, 531st Glamorgan Coast Regiment was formally disbanded, and the 664th Welsh Coast Regiment was formed as a new unit at Cardiff, though it is unclear why it was not considered as a successor to 531st Coast RGT. In 1950, the Welsh subtitle was changed to Glamorgan. However, it was soon afterwards decided to reduce the number of TA Coast regiments, and in 1953, the regiment was amalgamated with 425th Pembroke Coast RGT to form 408th Coast RGT based at the Defensible Barracks, Pembroke Dock, with R and S BTIs provided by the 664th. The new regiment took the subtitle Glamorganshire and Monmouthshire in 1954, but the Coast Artillery branch of the RA was disbanded on 31 December 1956. The Glamorgan batteries were amalgamated into 281st Glamorgan Yeomanry Field Regiment, while the Pembroke batteries were amalgamated into 302nd Pembroke Yeomanry Field Regiment. Honorary colonels the following served as honorary colonel of the unit: Lt. Col. Robert Windsor Clive, 1st Earl of Plymouth, appointed 1 November 1890. Captain Ivor Windsor Clive, 2nd Earl of Plymouth, appointed 12 March 1924. Memorial: there is a stone tablet in St. John the Baptist Church, Cardiff, as a memorial to the 69 men of the Glamorgan RGA who died during World War I. That is all for tonight. Let the silence settle in. Sleep well.